Hi everybody, welcome to another Simoda Knows Business Essentials series. I'm joined by Tim Latham, who's our head of data intelligence and knows quite a bit about AI. So today we're going to be talking about getting started with Microsoft Copilot for 365. And we're going to have a chat and let you know the best ways to roll it out for your business. So Tim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, I'm Tim Latham, Head of Data Intelligence here at Simoda. I essentially look after what we call or describe as our data value journey or our data intelligence journey, helping organisations get the foundational elements in place, maybe look at BI and analytics, and in the context of this session, the really interesting, more innovative stuff involving intelligent automation, and Copilot for 365 very neatly sits in that space.
So Tim, tell us, because everybody's heard about Copilot, and I guess nobody knows where to start with it. Can you just give us a bit of a rundown about what Copilot is?
Sure, yeah. I'm not sure everybody has actually heard of Copilot. I think maybe a lot of people in the business community have and are starting to, but certainly I think the vast majority of people have heard of ChatGPT. And essentially that's where Copilot started. OpenAI started or released ChatGPT to the world at the tail end of the year before last, to much fanfare, huge enthusiasm and interest. There's some stats coming out of Microsoft, like it got to 100 million users in a ridiculously short amount of time. And it's evolved as a tool since that first introduction. The first version was 3.5, 3.5 Turbo, etc. And people have used it for various things, not necessarily anything useful business-wise, but to write a poem about a dog on the moon or something silly like that. But what's happened over the last sort of 18 months is that Microsoft, which was a fundamental backer of OpenAI, has seen the opportunity of this ChatGPT tool and has integrated it into a variety of their solutions, and most specifically and interestingly into the 365 productivity tools. So the tools we all know and love: Outlook, PowerPoint, Teams, and essentially it's a conversational AI. So you can quite literally talk to the machine. And the core ChatGPT model that is the foundation of Copilot for 365 has essentially infinite access to all human knowledge, all publicly available knowledge. So it's incredibly talented and sophisticated. You can talk to the machine. It's a qualified doctor, it's a qualified lawyer, it's passed, accountancy exams, incredibly useful. But what Microsoft have done in terms of integrating it into 365 is that they've made that intelligence even better by giving it access, secure access, to the company's internal data. So through those applications, Outlook, Teams, etc., I'm counting, you can supplement the incredible ChatGPT knowledge with your own AI assistant for work to help you talk to the data in your organisation using the tools that we all use every day.
Interesting. So seems like a bit of a game changer, and I guess from what you've said, are there particular benefits for businesses in rolling out something like Copilot?
Many and varied. I think it's probably easiest in the first instance to sort of group them into three categories. The first is it allows people to unleash their creativity. How often, depending on your job role obviously, but how often, have you got a report, or you've got to write a strategy paper or something along those lines, you stared at a blank screen, you don't know where to start. Using Copilot, you can quite literally use natural language and type into, say, Word, I want a foundational strategy document for my business, considering all the things that are happening in the industry or the economy, and it'll create you a foundational sort of base document that you can then use as the starting point. And that might be 60, 70, 80% of what it needs to be. So it means you can focus on finessing it and editing it to be exactly what you wanted, the outcome to be. But that initial 60, 70, 80% of automated work, that could save you hours. The second aspect is unlocking productivity. We've already touched on that really in that first point in terms of creativity. But maybe when you've written that report, your next task might be, well, I need to turn that into a PowerPoint presentation to present it to my senior leadership team the day after tomorrow. Again, we've all sat at PowerPoint. So, you start your first slide, your intro slide, or you look for an existing presentation that you can edit. Again, with Copilot for 365, you can literally go into PowerPoint, direct it at the strategy document that you've written in Word, and ask it to create a 3, 5, 10, 15 slide presentation on that document. And it will automatically do that, saving hours of time. And it'll insert pictures for you. It'll even provide reader notes to support you in presenting it. It's a phenomenal tool. And the third level, in terms of upskilling, the Excel one is a good example in here. A good example of this, I think. You might have maybe new starters, interns, relatively low-level people who aren't really very capable in Excel. You might give them a task and they might struggle with it. But again, with Copilot integrated into Excel, they can just using natural language create pivot tables, create charts, find insights in data that's in Excel. Incredibly useful in terms of raising everyone's game.
That's really good. There's a lot there actually that I didn't know it could do. So if Copilot's sitting in your environment and it's obviously touching a lot of different files and folders and things like that, how can it access everything? Can it access all our data as a business? And is that actually secure?
Okay, yeah, really, really important point. And something I didn't touch on earlier. For people who are using, say, ChatGPT for real work purposes, there's a danger in that. And there have been a few sort of high-profile public instances of where this has gone wrong for organisations. If you interact with ChatGPT, you do release the information that you're sharing with it into the core model. So the ChatGPT model learns. So if you ask it to write a strategy paper or compare you to your nearest competition, that information then exists within ChatGPT, and someone else can ask to see your strategy in terms of competing with them. So a key thing about the Microsoft instance of Copilot for 365 is that it does use the ChatGPT model, but it's secure within your own tenant.
Yeah.
So it's got access to all that infinite knowledge in terms of the internet, but the questions you ask it and the data, the extra internal data that you provide to it are only within your tenant.
Right, okay.
And it doesn't necessarily have access to all your data. Importantly, it only has access to the data that's available within your Microsoft tenant. So if you've got other line of business systems or if you've got data elsewhere, it can't necessarily see that. So there is an opportunity at the start of the process to consider how you might be able to migrate some of that information into your Microsoft tenant, so that your Copilot instance does have access to it.
Interesting. So you can obviously shut things down. Like the management team can control the data that it can obtain for various functions across the business and for various seniority levels and things like that.
Absolutely, that's one of the key considerations to look at when you're considering, the whole context of how you might deploy ChatGPT. And for a lot of organisations, that is an important consideration. You can just get Copilot licenses and go hell for leather and see what happens. And organisations are doing that. I know people who've just found out they've got Copilot for 365 on their machine, and that's about all they know. Yeah. But really, to make it land effectively and be secure, there are two key considerations that organisations need to manage, and that is critically consider the state of the data that they're exposing Copilot to. And a sort of easy way to illustrate that is, again, talking about a strategy document. If you've got 6 different versions of your strategy document saved in SharePoint, going back 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, if you use Copilot for 365 to interrogate and talk to that strategy document, it's going to be compromised because it's looking at lots of legacy versions as well as the most up-to-date one. So in terms of data management, archiving, that's really important. It's an important thing to consider. The other aspect that you touched on there, Kate, is user controls.
Yeah.
Obviously, again, a lot of organizations will have, so many SharePoint sites and sort of file servers with all sorts of different folders, and there could be information deep in there that really some people who've got access to it shouldn't be able to find. And in the current state, they probably wouldn't be able to find it. But something that sort of, Copilot for 365 exposes is that with a simple question to the machine, they can find that data. And then an example that Microsoft often uses when talking about this sort of risk or security consideration is, if someone's interested in how much the CEO earns, they can ask Copilot. And if the data and user controls aren't set up correctly, it can find it.
So that's a risk really, isn't it? And why you have to make sure you roll it out properly and understand the security elements of that.
Yeah.
So in terms of, I know you've been speaking to a lot of Simoda customers about Copilot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a lot of conversations. Have you got any specific use cases that you can talk us through?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's two important ways of thinking about use cases for Copilot 365. The first and most obvious is obviously by application. Another important way of looking at this stuff is in terms of actual user stories, customer stories. And that's a really powerful way to do it as well, especially for the leadership team or the management who are considering how this stuff might be of use for different functions or people or their business as a whole. You can see it like we just have in terms of how it can be used by each application, but you can also look at it in terms of how different users in your organization might use it. So some examples. A salesperson has lots of account management meetings, with customers. If they're doing those in Teams, if you have Copilot in Teams, Copilot can listen to that conversation, summarize it, make notes, and even identify specific action points. Therefore saving that salesperson all sorts of time in terms of writing up those notes to share with the client afterwards. Leadership, your SLT, very busy people, don't necessarily get as much time as they'd like maybe to spend going through their emails. If they come to an email that's got a long trail that someone's now asking them to get involved in, within Outlook you can ask Copilot to summarize this email chain, and it'll do that for you just like that.
Saves a lot of time.
Absolutely. Also maybe a leadership thing, but I think for most people, I was going to say most managers, most people in most organizations are invited to too many meetings. And often you have conflicts, you can't make one, you have to choose which one you're going to go to. Again, within Teams, you can use Copilot and actually ask it to attend the meeting on your behalf.
Wow.
So you don't have to. You get the minutes of that meeting, you get the action points, and you get notified of any actions that are yours.
Gosh.
Again, saving all sorts of time.
So who needs a PA? Exactly.
Well, that's one of the Microsoft terms. There you go. It was going to come at some point. There's my speech marks. Microsoft describe it as your AI assistant at work. It's like an incredibly gifted intern. For next to nothing per month, you've got an incredibly intelligent and powerful assistant sat right next to you, or essentially sat in your computer. Another one is like in a marketing environment. We touched on already the idea of having to create a strategy paper, but it can be very creative as well. So a marketing person who might have the task of, say, setting up a product brochure for a new product. All they've got is an internal document like a spec sheet, a product sheet out of like a technical or production environment. They can expose that to Copilot and ask Copilot to write a blog post, create a strap line, compare that product to other products like that in the marketplace and create a table of features. Incredibly useful that way.
I'll be writing that down for the marketing team.
And I said, there are other examples as well. We might be short for time. There are similar examples in terms of just using your imagination, how HR can use it, how finance can use it. Obviously, finance, very numbers based, probably most likely to find benefits using Excel. but those other tools are, potentially useful as well.
Brilliant. So I guess, with all new technology comes an element of training. Do teams need training on Copilot, or is it quite intuitive and you can sort of, I guess, just start by using it for what you want and,
Okay, yes and yes. You can just jump in, absolutely. As with most Microsoft, well, as with all Microsoft products, there is plenty of online training available. Copilot for 365 is no exception to that. But I think probably the most important thing to think about in terms of training and starting to use Copilot for 365 is something called prompting. Prompting is essentially how you ask the question of the machine. Yeah, so there's a really useful way to approach prompting. Now, there's lots of support in terms of how to do prompting within the tool itself. But a good way to look at it is to consider 4 aspects of your prompt. What's your goal? So for example, give me 5 key topics. What's your content? I need it for a meeting with an IT director. What's your expectation? I want it in a formal, technical term. And the 4th is source. Consider the services that this business is looking for by pointing it at an IT strategy paper they may have available on their website. And maybe also consider the services that we make available as outlined on our website. It'll do those things. That kind of sophisticated question will allow you to more likely get the answer that you're looking for. But again, it's Copilot, not autopilot. It's not necessarily going to do it all for you 100% perfect, but it might do 80, 90% of what you're looking for, leaving you to do the tweaking. And that said, prompt engineering is an emerging thing, but it is a conversational tool. So you can just ask it a simple question, and if it doesn't give you back what you're looking for, tell it. Ask, give me examples of, it might only give you 3. Give me 5. Compare this product with its competitors. It might miss one out. So you go back and say, also include this extra business.
So you sort of train to, write these prompts, but then also you adapt and you develop your style as you go, really, don't you?
Yeah. You'll learn by doing. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's interesting because it's not terribly prescriptive in terms of how you can use it. But if you start using it and start to understand how powerful it can be, your skills and ability to use it more effectively in more various ways are bound to accelerate.
Yeah, you can see the skill on people's CVs in the future, can't you?
Absolutely.
Prompter for Copilot. So everything that you've said about Copilot so far, I guess one of the big questions that comes to mind is it customizable as a tool?
Well, I think, like we've said, out of the box, it's incredibly flexible. You can use it in all sorts of different ways. It can be customizable by making sure that potentially you bring extra data into the Microsoft environment. But again, Microsoft talks about a Copilot journey, and once you've got reasonably strong adoption and usage, a key way to improve the power of Copilot is in extensibility. So there are absolutely plugins available to enable it to access other data sources. And even there's capabilities to extend its functionality by creating bespoke Copilots in a tool called Copilot Studio.
Oh, right.
So absolutely, yes.
Oh,
it is flexible and extendable in that kind of adaptable way.
So you've obviously been around the block when it comes to Copilot a little bit already. What's the feedback that you're hearing so far from early adopters?
Microsoft's very keen to share, the positive stories coming out of the early adopter sort of community, and it is early days. It's a tool that's only really been around at all, tail end of last year, where Copilot sort of piloted it, forgive the pun, in a select group of their core enterprise businesses and the likes of BP, etc. And they've collated seriously the feedback coming out of those organisations And just throwing some stats at that question, 70% of respondents say they're more productive.
Yeah.
68% say it's improved the quality of their work.
Wow.
64%, are spending less time processing emails. We all love doing that. 75% of people spend less time searching for information within their organisation. And a really interesting headline is that the best users of Copilot are suggesting it's potentially saving them 10 hours and more per month, which is a huge amount of time.
Yeah, well,
that's finding an extra day.
That's a business case within itself, isn't
Exactly,
it? To use Copilot. So tell us the numbers now. So how much is Copilot? And most importantly, is it good value for money?
Yes, the killer question. It is an interesting one. It's often where people first start.
Yeah.
They'll hear about it. Ooh, that sounds interesting.
How much is it going to
How much is it?
Yeah.
Before going through a lot of the other considerations that we've talked about.
Yeah.
This classic sales cycle, you should save price to the end. People don't do that. How much is it? So Microsoft talk about it's $30 per user per month. That's obviously a US price. In the UK, there's an annual price for Copilot for 365 of £296 per user. And there's a 4-year annual commitment up front. And on the surface, you might think, oh, that's a lot of users. Oh, that's a high cost, right? I've got 100 users or I've got 1,000 users. That's a big chunk of money. But I think when you've considered its usefulness in terms of a productivity, creativity enhancing tool, and the upskilling benefits that we've talked about already in this, when you distill down £296 a year to sort of a daily cost, it's about £1 a day.
Right.
So for a reasonably paid knowledge worker, say 30 grand, maybe 40, that kind of area, it equates to less than 5 minutes a day in terms of time saved to make that worthwhile. So when you think about how much time spent looking for data, reviewing emails, writing meeting notes, struggling to create documents in Word or PowerPoint, or going to multiple meetings that you can't possibly because you're only a person. If your people can't save more than 5 minutes a month using this tool, I think it's, like you said earlier, it's a game changer.
Yeah, well, I think for a lot of people, in just speaking generically, 20% of the day is made up with admin tasks anyway, isn't it? Checking your emails, summarising meetings, writing bits of content here and there. So for me, it would save a lot more. I guess it depends on your job function, doesn't it? And where your job is. But for me in marketing, it would save, it has been saving significant amounts of time. Yeah. I'd say at least,
And candidly, hands up, I've used it to prepare for this.
Yeah.
I asked Copilot, what are 10 important questions, that an IT business should be able to get across to a customer who's viewing a webinar, and it gave me 10. And I thought, nah, they're all right. Give me another 10. Give me answers to 2, 4, and 6. And then that foundational start, preparing for this, that saved me my 5 minutes yesterday, and many times over. I probably saved half an hour or an hour, preparing for this session. Yeah.
Well, what a better way to prepare for a talk on Copilot
than by using Copilot. Absolutely.
So let's just talk about Simoda for a second. So what we do as a business and what your expertise is in. How can Simoda, and you particularly, support businesses through this process, getting it right, helping them understand Copilot and how to best use it for their business?
Yeah, okay, well, absolutely. We've got a sort of a soup to nuts approach to Copilot. We've got Microsoft customers that we're already starting to help through this journey. And it's something that we're developing as an offering to be able to talk to everyone about. And it goes through the full consideration process. You've heard of Copilot, you're interested, let's talk about it. Let's understand what your use cases might be. Let's try and determine, a cost of Copilot versus, the savings in terms of FTE offset that you can find using it. Maybe we might only start with 5 users or 5 licenses in an organisation of 100. Get some champions in there, get some early learning and some understanding. and obviously we can help with all that. But it's important, like we already said, to consider the other aspects of making sure that Copilot lands well, making sure that your data is in a sensible state, making sure that your user controls are set up in terms of archiving, etc. And we've got solutions that we can A, assess that situation, and B, make adjustments and set up alignment to make sure that you're in a great state for Copilot to land effectively. And obviously we can sell you the licenses, that's the easy bit, but then also we want to make sure that adoption is sound, making sure you've got champions that are talking about it across the organisation, making sure once you've identified those first 5, 10, 50 users, we're getting value for money. We're optimising the value out of the tool and then sharing that knowledge and understanding across as much of the organisation as possible. And AI is a journey. Copilot is a great way to start. And then it can open up for all sorts of different organisations an understanding of how this kind of sophisticated technology can potentially transform the business in other ways.
Oh, great. So you could say Simoda's like a business's Copilot for Copilot then.
Oh, I love that. Let me write that down. Yes.
That's where marketing comes in. Yeah, so it's my job. So Tim, thanks for that. That's been really useful, and I hope the viewers have found it useful, at least just to understand Copilot and how to go about it. Obviously, we're always here, the team at Simoda, to help you.
Feels like that.
Yeah, to help be your Copilot for Copilot. I'm just going to keep saying it. But thanks so much for joining us. And do keep watching our Simoda Knows Business Essentials series. Do comment or like or anything. If you've got any questions, by all means direct them to myself or Tim. That's a wrap. Simoda out.